Welcome back, Lincoln Currency. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving deeply into one of the coins that often catches collectors' eyes, the 1970 Lincoln Memorial Penny. We're going to explore its history, its design, its physical specifications, its minting, the variations, condition grading, what affects its value, how much it really sells for today, and then we'll touch on some inflated or exaggerated claims and what would need to be true for such claims. Let's get started. Let me begin by setting the scene for 1970 in the United States Mint, especially at the Denver Mint, since that is where the D Mint mark comes from. In 1970, the United States was producing Lincoln Memorial cents, often called Lincoln Pennies, or Memorial Pennies. These coins featured President Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, front, and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, back. The motto, "In God We Trust, Liberty," and the date are on the obverse, on the reverse. United States of America, 1 cent, and E pluribus unum. Designer credit. The obverse design, Lincoln's bust, is by Victor David Brenner. The reverse, Lincoln Memorial, design is by Frank Gasparo. Now, detail by detail, the physical specifications. Mass/weight. The standard 1970 Lincoln Memorial Penny is composed of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. USA Coin Book +2 Cointrackers.com +2 It weighs around 3.11 grams. USA Coin Book +1 The diameter is about 19.00 millimeters. USA Coin Book +2 Cointrackers.com +2 The edge is smooth, no reading. The thickness is approximately in line with other Lincoln Memorial cents. Mintage. The 1970 Denver Mint produced a very large number of these coins. The mintage figure is around 2,891,438,900 pieces. Cointrackers.com +2 USA Coin Book +2 Because so many were made, the coin is very common in most circulated grades. Metal, alloy as said, 95% copper, 5% tin and zinc. This alloy composition is consistent with U.S. pennies until 1982, when zinc-based core coins were introduced. Cointrackers.com +2 USA Coin Book +2 Design/symbolism/obverse and reverse. Obverse. The front of the coin, the obverse, features a portrait of Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, in profile facing right. Above his head is, "In God We Trust." To one side is the date, 1970, and to indicate where it was minted, a D mint mark on the obverse, usually just under the date, or to its side depending on how the die was made. Liberty is inscribed to the left. These inscriptions and design cues are typical for Lincoln cents of this period. Reverse. On the reverse side is an image of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. You can see the steps, the columns, and between them the statue of Lincoln inside, though on small coins, the statue is tiny, sometimes hard to see. Above, United States of America. Below, 1 cent. Between or above columns, E pluribus unum. Symbolic meaning. The Lincoln Memorial design honors Abraham Lincoln, who is very widely revered, and the memorial is one of the key monuments in Washington, symbolizing unity, emancipation, civil rights, etc. The inscriptions reflect national mottos and the identity of the currency, 1 cent, and Republican values. History of minting, context, and variations. In 1970, the U.S. Mint was still using copper-based cents. These coins circulated heavily. Because so many were minted, most examples you find in circulation are worn, brown, i.e. copper oxidized, sometimes with surface damage, scratches, etc. As we continue this deep exploration of the 1970 Lincoln Memorial cent, it is worth stepping back more than half a century earlier to when this entire Lincoln cent series first began. The Lincoln cent was introduced in 1909 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. It was the first time that a U.S. coin depicted a real person, breaking from earlier traditions of using symbolic figures like liberty. President Theodore Roosevelt had pushed for more artistic and meaningful coinage, and the choice of Lincoln, who had preserved the Union and ended slavery, carried profound symbolic weight. The artist Victor David Brenner, an immigrant sculptor from Lithuania, created the portrait of Lincoln that has remained on the cent ever since. He based it on a photograph of Lincoln taken by Matthew Brady. The original reverse design of the Lincoln cent from 1909 to 1958 showed 2 wheat stalks and was called the Lincoln wheat cent. Then, beginning in 1959, to mark the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth, the reverse was changed to show the Lincoln Memorial. That reverse was designed by Frank Gasparo, who at the time was an assistant engraver at the U.S. Mint and later became chief engraver. So the 1970 penny is part of the Lincoln Memorial Cent series, running from 1959 through 2008. The design continuity is part of why collectors love this series. Lincoln's portrait, with its thoughtful expression, is one of the most enduring and recognized coin designs in U.S. history. Gasparo's Lincoln Memorial reverse, though simple and geometric, was symbolic because it actually includes a tiny engraving of the statue of Lincoln seated between the columns, meaning Lincoln appears on both sides of the coin, an interesting numismatic fact. Now, about the Denver Mint. The D Mint mark signifies that this coin was struck at the United States Mint facility in Denver, Colorado. The Denver Mint opened in 1906 and has long been a major production facility, churning out billions of coins annually. In 1970, the Denver Mint produced nearly 2.9 billion Lincoln cents. These were struck on copper planchets weighing about 3.11 grams. The planchets were blank copper discs that had been punched out of rolled sheets of copper alloy. They were fed into high-speed coin presses where they were struck with hardened steel dies bearing the coin designs. After striking, the coins went through inspection and then were bagged in huge quantities and shipped to Federal Reserve banks for circulation. At that time, the U.S. Mint was not yet using the copper-plated zinc composition that would appear in 1982. So 1970 cents are heavier than modern pennies. You can actually tell the difference by weight. If you place a 1970 penny on a sensitive digital scale, it should read close to 3.11 grams, whereas a post-1982 zinc cent weighs about 2.5 grams. Collectors often use this test to separate copper and zinc cents. Moving deeper into the world of grading and coin value, one thing that makes all the difference is how grading companies assess condition. The major grading services are PCGS, Professional Coin Grading Service, NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Company, and Annex. They use the Sheldon grading scale from 1 to 70, where 1 is barely identifiable and 70 is flawless perfection. Most coins found in change are in circulated grades like very fine, VF, extremely fine, XF, or about uncirculated AU. Mint state, MS, grades go from MS 60 to MS 70, and only the highest mint state coins with brilliant red color and no marks are worth big premiums. For example, a 1970 Lincoln cent graded MS 67 red by PCGS might be worth hundreds of dollars because very few survive that nice from such a massive mintage. Each tiny mark, scratch, or spot lowers the grade and therefore the value. So when people talk about a coin being worth huge amounts, they are usually referring to top population coins, meaning among all the coins graded, only a handful achieved that level. The scarcity at the top is what drives up price. There are also proof coins from 1970, but they were made only at the San Francisco Mint and have an S mint mark, so the 1970 D is not a proof issue. Sometimes people confuse the two. Proof coins are struck with specially prepared dies on polished planchets to create mirror-like surfaces and very sharp details. Because they are made for collectors, not circulation, they usually stay pristine. The 1970 D was strictly a business strike, made for general use. Let's also talk about how myths and legends grow around certain pennies. On the internet, you will often see clickbait claims that certain common pennies are worth millions. Often these are based on confusion between similar-looking dates or between mint marks. For example, there is a very famous 1943 copper penny and a 1944 steel penny, both rare era coins, which have sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Because of those real stories, people assume any old-looking penny could be worth millions, but the vast majority are common. There are also known double die varieties for some years, like the famous 1955 double die cent or the 1969 S double die. That 1969's double die cent is valuable, sometimes selling for tens of thousands, because the doubling is dramatic and rare. But for 1970D, there is no known major double die on the obverse. There are some minor die varieties and errors, but none in the tens of millions of dollars range. The market for Lincoln cents is very active, with collectors building full sets from 1909 to present. They often try to find each date and mint mark in the highest grade they can. Registry sets on PCGS's website let collectors compete for the finest set, which creates strong demand for the top-graded examples. That is why an MS-67 red 1970D penny might sell for hundreds while a common one is only 1 cent. The difference is not in rarity of mintage, but rarity of perfect preservation. Now imagine how a coin could theoretically reach astronomical value like $91 million. It would likely have to be a unique, previously unknown coin, maybe a transitional error struck on a gold planchet, or a spectacular minting mistake discovered decades later. It would need massive publicity, and 2 or more ultra-wealthy collectors bidding against each other. That scenario has happened with a few famous coins, like the 1933 St. Gaudens Double Eagle, which sold for over $18 million. But that coin was gold, extremely rare, and had a fascinating legal history involving confiscation and lawsuits. No ordinary copper cent has reached anything close to that level. However, for the sake of imagination, if a 1970D cent were discovered struck on a rare experimental planchet, such as a pure silver or gold blank, and authenticated as unique by PCGS, it could create a sensation. News outlets would cover it, collectors would scramble, and theoretically someone might pay an outrageous sum just to own the only one. In that kind of once-in-a-century situation, tens of millions could be possible. But nothing like that is currently known. In practical collecting, people often search rolls of pennies from banks, hoping to find high-grade copper cents or errors. This hobby is called roll hunting. Some collectors also melt down copper cents for their metal value, though in the United States it is illegal to melt pennies for profit. Still, the copper content of a 1970D penny is worth about 2 cents at current copper prices, so even for scrap they are worth more than face value, which is why many collectors save them. An interesting thing about copper cents is how they tone over time. When first struck, they are bright reddish-orange. Over years they turn brown. Some collectors actually like the look of natural toning, while others prefer blazing red. Grading services note the color because it affects value. RD, red, is worth the most, RB, red-brown, is in the middle, and BN, brown, is least. The Lincoln Memorial design itself lasted from 1959 to 2008, after which it was replaced by the Lincoln Bicentennial designs in 2009, and then the Shield Reverse in 2010. That means the 1970D is part of a long era in U.S. coinage that is now completely over, giving it a nostalgic appeal. Many people alive today remember using these copper pennies in daily life, which gives them sentimental as well as numismatic interest. There is also a cultural dimension to Lincoln cents. They are one of the first coins most American children encounter and collect. Because they are small and common, they are a gateway into coin collecting. Many great collectors started by filling blue Whitman folders with Lincoln cents from change. The 1970D would be one of. So if someone is looking at their 1970D penny and wondering if it might be valuable, the first step is simply to examine it carefully. Most people just glance at the date and mint mark, but a collector looks much closer. The best way is under a good light with a 10x jeweler's loupe or a digital microscope. Start with the basics. Does the coin look worn or sharp? If Lincoln's hair, beard, cheekbone, and coat lines are smooth or flattened, it's been heavily circulated, which almost always puts it at face value. But if the details are crisp, with sharp edges on the lettering and no flattening, that's a good sign. Also check the color. Bright reddish surfaces are better than dull brown, because that means the original copper has not oxidized much. Look for spots, corrosion, or scratches, which lower grade. If the coin looks remarkably fresh, it might be worth having graded. Next, look for mint errors or varieties. On 1970D cents, known errors can include off-center strikes, where the design is shifted to one side, leaving a blank crescent of planchet showing. The more dramatic the off-center, the higher the value. Another error is a clipped planchet, where a curved section is missing from the edge due to mispunched blanks. Some coins are struck through foreign material, leaving strange depressions or shapes on the surface. If the coin has a raised doubling of letters or numbers, it could be a doubled die, though known strong doubled dies for 1970 are more often from the 1970s issue. Still, any dramatic doubling should be checked. Collectors will sometimes submit possible errors to error specialists for confirmation. If the coin seems promising, the next big step is grading and certification. This is where professional grading companies like PCGS or NGC come in. To do this, the collector first creates an account with the grading service or goes through an authorized dealer who can submit coins for them. The coin is carefully packaged in a flip, a clear holder, and sent with submission forms and payment. The grading fee can range from around $20 to over $100 depending on the service level. Once the grading company receives it, they authenticate it to make sure it's genuine, then examine it under magnification to assign a numeric grade from 1 to 70 and a color designation, RD, RB, BN for copper. They also check for errors or varieties. If everything checks out, they encapsulate the coin in a tamper-evident plastic holder called a slab, with a label showing its grade, certification number, and other details. This process can take weeks or even months. Having a coin in a certified slab changes everything. It gives buyers confidence that they know exactly what they're getting. Many serious collectors only buy coins that are third-party graded. A raw 1970 penny might sell for a few dollars, but the same coin graded MS67 red by PCGS could sell for hundreds. Certification gives it credibility and opens the door to major auction houses. Once the coin is graded, the next step for a collector aiming to sell is to choose the right venue. There are different levels of the coin market. At the lowest level are casual sales on online marketplaces like eBay or Etsy, where uncertified coins often trade for small sums. But for high-grade or rare pieces, serious sellers go to major auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, or Great Collections. These firms have global buyer networks and can get far higher prices. To consign a coin to an auction, the seller contacts the firm, sends photos or the slab number, and the firm evaluates if it's suitable for their upcoming sale. If accepted, the auction house will include it in their catalog, often with professional photography and detailed descriptions. When the coin goes to auction, the excitement begins. Collectors from around the world can bid, either online or live. Auctions often start below market value to attract bids, then the price climbs as bidders compete. Sometimes two wealthy bidders get locked in a battle of pride and ego, each determined to win no matter what, and this drives prices far above estimates. This bidding psychology is how record prices happen. It's part rational desire for rarity, part emotional competition. A single bidding war can catapult a coin's price to shocking heights, though this happens only with the most coveted pieces. Even with this process, though, a common date Lincoln cent like the 1970 usually tops out in the hundreds of dollars in top grades. To reach millions, the coin would need extraordinary circumstances. But the principle is the same: rarity, condition, authentication, and competition create value. That is why the coin hobby can be so thrilling. You never know when an overlooked coin might turn out to be a spectacular find that lights up the market. Preservation is another crucial part of collecting, especially for copper coins. Copper is reactive and will tarnish, spot, or corrode if handled carelessly. Collectors never touch the surface with bare fingers because skin oils can cause permanent marks. Instead, they hold coins by the edges and store them in inert holders, often with silica gel to control humidity. Temperature swings and moisture are dangerous for copper. A coin that stays bright red for decades is much more valuable than one that turns brown, so proper storage can literally preserve value. That's why old rolls of uncirculated pennies found in bank wrappers are so exciting. The coins inside often stayed untouched and still have blazing color. Another subtle but important factor is provenance, the history of a coin's ownership. Sometimes a coin gets extra value if it once belonged to a famous collector or was part of a legendary collection. Auction houses often highlight this in their catalogs. If someone could prove a 1970 penny came from a historic hoard or had some unique story, that might boost its appeal, though usually not to astronomical levels. Still, stories can influence collectors. Humans love narratives, and in collectibles, stories sometimes add as much perceived value as the object itself. Then there's the role of the grading population. Each year, more coins get submitted to PCGS and NGC, and they publish population reports showing how many coins have been graded at each level. If a 1970 penny is one of only 5 known in MS67 red, competition for those 5 can be fierce. If someday someone managed to find one in MS68 red, the first ever, that coin could set a new record for the date. That's the kind of discovery that fuels the dream of striking it rich from pocket change. But for most collectors, the real reward is not just money but the hunt. Searching through thousands of coins to find a rare variety, or a pristine gem is exciting. It's like treasure hunting. The knowledge, the patience, and the satisfaction of finding something special are what make coin collecting addictive. Even a simple 1970 penny becomes a link to history, a tiny artifact that survived half a century of change. Every scratch tells a story of where it has been, in pockets, cash registers, maybe dropped on sidewalks and picked up again. Preserving one perfectly as it left the mint feels like rescuing history. This deep emotional connection explains why people sometimes pay far more than logical book value for a coin. If a collector has spent years trying to upgrade their set, and one missing piece appears in the perfect grade, they might pay almost any price. That's how bidding wars erupt. And it's why a 1970 penny in an elite grade could one day bring a shocking hammer price, not because it's intrinsically rare, but because human desire makes it valuable. So while most 1970 Lincoln cents are worth only pennies, the pathway from pocket change to a high-value collectible is real. It runs through close examination, authentication, preservation, certification, and finally the drama of the auction room. And that journey, the long-shot hope that your coin might be the best one known, is what keeps collectors searching and dreaming. As we go even further into understanding the 1970 penny's place in the world of coin collecting, it helps to see the larger forces that shape coin values. The coin market is like a miniature version of the overall economy. Prices rise when more people want to collect, and they fall when interest fades. In the 1970s and 1980s, for example, there was a huge boom in coin collecting in the United States. Millions of people entered the hobby, prices surged, and then after the boom cooled in the late 1980s, prices for many common coins dropped. This shows that even though a coin's physical characteristics never change, its market value can swing with human enthusiasm. Today, Lincoln cents are collected worldwide, but they are especially beloved in the United States, where generations of kids grew up searching their change for missing dates. This steady base of interest keeps the market for Lincoln cents very active. Even within the Lincoln cent series, market cycles come and go. Some years become hot when a new variety is discovered, and prices spike. Then they can cool again once more examples are found or the excitement fades. This is why when someone looks at a price guide and sees a number, they have to remember that it's just a snapshot of what buyers and sellers agreed on recently, not a permanent truth. A 1970 penny might be listed as $20 in MS65 red today, but if thousands of collectors suddenly chase top-grade memorial cents, that same coin might rise to $50. If interest fades, it could drop back to $10. This ebb and flow is part of what makes collecting thrilling and unpredictable. To put things in perspective, some individual Lincoln cents have sold for astonishing amounts, though none are from 1970. The most famous is probably the 1943 copper cent. During World War II, pennies were made of steel coated in zinc to save copper for the war effort, but a few leftover copper planchets accidentally got struck. Only a couple dozen exist, and one sold for over $1 million. Another legendary rarity is the 1955 double die cent, where the doubling on the date and lettering is so bold you can see it without magnification. Those can bring tens of thousands of dollars in top condition. And the 1969 double die cent is another, known for its extremely strong doubled lettering. Those have sold for over $100,000 in high grades. These examples are what fuel people's dreams that an ordinary-looking penny could be worth life-changing money. They are real, but they are the exception, and the 1970D has no known variety on that level. Still, seeing these sales proves it is possible for small cents to reach incredible prices when they are rare enough. Building a full Lincoln cent collection is a goal many collectors set for themselves, and the 1970D fits into the middle of that journey. The series stretches from 1909 to the present, but collectors usually divide it into the wheat cent era, 1909 to 1958, the memorial cent era, 1959 to 2008, the 4 Lincoln bicentennial reverses of 2009, and the Shield cents from 2010 onward. A complete set by date and mint mark means over 300 different coins. Some are cheap and common, like the 1970D, while others are tough and costly, like the 1909 SVDB or the 1914D. As a collector fills holes in their album, they build a tangible timeline of American history, with the 1970D representing the early 1970s, a time of political change, the Vietnam War, and cultural shifts. It's like holding a tiny copper time capsule from that era. Some advanced collectors build not just date and mint sets but also quality sets, seeking the highest graded example of each year. That's where registry set competition comes in. On the PCGS website, collectors can publicly register their sets, and they get ranked by average grade. This creates intense demand for top-end coins. If a 1970D penny is needed to push a set to number 1 in the world, a collector might pay far more than its guide value just to gain that spot. This is one of the main ways prices sometimes jump beyond what seems logical. It isn't about what the coin is worth in a vacuum, it's about what it's worth to the one person who needs it most. This is also where speculation and hype can distort the market. Sometimes, social media videos or online posts claim that certain coins are suddenly valuable, and a rush of people start hoarding them. Prices spike temporarily, then crash when everyone realizes they're not actually rare. This has happened with many modern coins. For example, when rumors spread that 1982 small-date copper cents were worth thousands, people started weighing their pennies and listing them online for absurd prices. But only a few rare transitional errors are truly valuable. Most are common. The same kind of hype sometimes hits the 1970D, with viral claims that one sold for tens of millions of dollars, even though no such sale ever occurred. These bubbles can trick new collectors, but experienced numismatists know to check real auction records and population reports before believing wild claims. Economic conditions also affect coin prices. When the overall economy is strong and people feel wealthy, they spend more on hobbies and collectibles, which pushes coin prices up. When the economy is weak, discretionary spending drops and prices soften. This means that a 1970D penny in MS67 red might bring $500 in a hot market, but only $300 in a slow one, even if nothing about the coin changed. The metal market can have a small effect too, since the 1970D is copper. If copper prices spike, more people become interested in saving pre-1982 cents for their metal content. This doesn't make any one 1970D penny rare, but it can slightly increase general demand. The psychology of collecting drives much of this market movement. Coins are not just pieces of metal, they are symbols, memories, and trophies. For many collectors, owning a flawless coin from their birth year or from a significant historical year feels special. The 1970D might be someone's birth year, or the year they graduated, or the year their parents married. That personal meaning can push them to pay more than book value. If two people both want the same coin for sentimental reasons, they can bid each other up. This is one reason why certain years randomly become more expensive than logic would predict. In rare cases, speculative frenzies can create bubble prices, where hype pushes values far beyond sustainable levels. Then, when the hype fades, prices crash back down. This has happened many times in the broader coin market. It happened in the late 1980s when investment funds bought up huge numbers of rare coins, sending prices skyrocketing, then dumping them and causing a crash. It happened again with state quarters in the early 2000s, when people hoarded rolls thinking they would be valuable. Now they trade for face value. If somehow a viral video convinced millions of people that the 1970 penny was the next $1 million coin, prices might spike briefly. But once people realize they are common, the bubble would burst. This shows why serious collectors focus on genuine rarity and quality, not hype. Through all of this, the 1970 penny remains what it has always been, a common, well-made copper Lincoln cent that represents its era. Its value depends on condition, rarity within its grade, and collector demand. While it is extremely unlikely to ever be worth $91 million, it will always have a place in the Lincoln cent story, and for some collectors, owning a beautiful example of it brings just as much joy as owning a rarer and more expensive coin. That joy, the connection to history, the thrill of the hunt, and the satisfaction of completing a set, is the real treasure of coin collecting. In the spring of 1970, inside the Denver Mint, enormous machines roared in a relentless rhythm as copper alloy sheets were rolled, punched, and transformed into blank discs called planchets. Among the billions of pieces produced that year, one particular blank waited in a stainless steel hopper, indistinguishable from all the others. It was a tiny disc of metal, 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, cut from a sheet that gleamed like reddish gold under the factory lights. The air was hot and metallic, and the floor vibrated with the constant thump of coin presses striking thousands of times each hour. That blank planchet tumbled down a chute, rattled into a feed tube, and in an instant was caught between two hardened steel dies. With a sudden explosive blow, the obverse die drove Victor David Brenner's portrait of Abraham Lincoln deep into one side, while the reverse die drove Frank Gasparo's Lincoln Memorial into the other. In less than a fraction of a second, the flat disc became a finished coin, its design sharp, its surfaces blazing with fresh mint luster, and a tiny D punched just beneath the date 1970 to mark its birth in Denver. From there, it slid down another chute into a bin with thousands of its identical siblings, each one glimmering copper bright. Later that day, workers shoveled them into canvas bags, each holding 50 pounds of pennies, tagged with the Denver Mint's markings. Forklifts carried the bags to loading docks where they were stacked onto pallets and lifted into the back of armored trucks. Doors slammed shut with hollow echoes, and the trucks rolled out through the guarded gates, heading east to Federal Reserve banks and then on to local banks across the Midwest. That single new penny, along with millions of others, was released quietly into the stream of commerce, ready to begin its journey through human hands. A few weeks later, in a small grocery store in Kansas, a cashier cracked open a fresh roll of Denver minted pennies. The coins slid into her register drawer with soft metallic clicks, their bright color flashing like tiny suns. One of them, that same penny from the Denver Mint, found itself handed as change to a young mother buying bread and milk. She slipped it into her coin purse without a thought. Over the following days she spent it at a gas station, where it passed into the till, then into the hand of a mechanic who dropped it into his pocket with a few other coins. He bought a cup of coffee the next morning, and the penny moved on again, never noticed, just another copper disc fulfilling its quiet purpose. For years it wandered like this, from cash register to pocket to change jar. Children might have dropped it into a piggy bank, only to later pour it back out in a noisy clatter of coins. Sometimes it sat forgotten in a kitchen drawer, sometimes it fell between couch cushions, sometimes it rolled across a store counter and rang faintly as it hit the floor. It rode in blue jeans through hot summers and bitter winters, rubbing against keys and nickels and quarters until its surfaces dulled from mirror bright to a soft reddish brown. The high points of Lincoln's cheek and jaw wore down, fine hairlines on the beard blurred, the rims smoothed from thousands of small impacts. By the late 1980s it had become an ordinary brown cent, indistinguishable from billions of others. But not every coin's fate is wear. Some pennies are spared the endless wear of circulation, hidden away before they can be scratched and dulled. Imagine that on the day our 1970 penny first arrived at that grocery store, a boy of about 10 spotted its bright color and perfect shine. Maybe he loved collecting coins with his grandfather, carefully sliding them into the blue Whitman folders with round holes for each date and mint mark. he asked the cashier if he could trade a dull old penny from his pocket for one of the shiny new ones. The cashier smiled and agreed, and the boy picked our penny, blazing like new copper. That simple choice saved it from the slow erosion of time. The boy carried it home cupped in his palm like a tiny treasure. He set it carefully on his desk and examined it under the small magnifying glass his grandfather had given him. He saw the tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside the memorial, the crisp lettering, the sharp edges, and no scratches anywhere. He pressed it gently into an empty slot in his Whitman album labeled 1970D, where it stayed untouched. The pages of the album closed over it like a vault, sealing it away from skin oils, from pockets, from the friction that would have erased its mint glow. While billions of its siblings grew dull and worn, this one kept its blazing copper-red skin. Decades passed. The boy grew up, moved out, went to college, started a job, and the coin album stayed behind in a box at his parents' house. Dust gathered on the lid, but inside, the penny was unchanged. Through the 1970s oil crisis, the 1980s inflation, the birth of the internet, the turn of the millennium, and beyond, it lay still and silent, locked in its tiny paper cell. The rest of the world aged, but it remained as it had been on that day in 1970, with microscopic flow lines from the minting press still radiating like frozen sunlight across its fields. One day in the 2020s, the man, now middle-aged, returned to his childhood home to help clean out the attic. He found the old blue folder and opened it, smiling at the memories. He noticed how one penny gleamed brighter than all the rest. He had read somewhere online that old pennies could be valuable if they were in perfect condition. Curious, he took out his phone and searched for 1970D Lincoln penny values. He read that most are worth only 1 cent, but that superb examples graded MS-67 red could be worth hundreds. He realized his coin had never been touched since he was a child. Carefully, he removed it from the album with cotton gloves and under bright light saw no spots, no scratches, only blazing red color and razor-sharp details. It looked like it had just left the mint. Excited, he took it to a local coin shop. The dealer peered at it under a loupe and nodded with surprise. He told the man it might be worth submitting to PCGS for grading. So the man filled out the forms, paid the fee, and sent it off, the same little penny that had once jingled in a cash register now sealed in protective packaging. Weeks later, a package returned with the coin locked in a clear plastic slab bearing a label, 1970D1C, MS67RD, certified by PCGS. The man's hands trembled as he held it. This was one of the finest known examples of a coin struck more than 50 years ago, preserved only because of a childhood whim. He consigned it to a major auction house. The listing appeared online with professional photos, the copper glowing like fire, bidding open low, but collectors who needed it for their top-ranked registry sets swooped in. The price climbed. 2 wealthy competitors battled, each desperate to complete their sets with this rare gem. The man watched the live auction online, his heart pounding. The bids rose far beyond what he expected, past $100, past $200, climbing to $600, then $800. At last the hammer fell. He had sold the tiny coin he once saved from his allowance for almost $1,000. For a moment, he just stared at the screen in disbelief. All those years in a dusty attic, and it had come out glowing like the day it was born. The penny's journey had spanned decades and countless chances of loss, yet it had survived untouched, transforming from mere change into a cherished collector's treasure. Most of its siblings had been spent, worn down, cast aside, melted, or lost. But this one had taken a different path. It showed what was possible, however rare, when luck, care, and time come together, how an ordinary object could become extraordinary. And somewhere, scattered in drawers, jars, and old albums across America, a few more 1970D pennies might still be waiting, perfect and forgotten, for someone to notice their glow and set them on the same miraculous path. After the auction ended and the man received his payment, the 1970D penny that had been plucked from circulation half a century before passed into new hands. Its buyer was a serious numismatist with a passion for perfection, someone who viewed high-grade coins as tiny monuments to human craftsmanship. He placed the slabbed coin carefully into a climate-controlled vault with dozens of other immaculate Lincoln cents spanning every decade. The penny rested there in darkness, the air perfectly dry, the temperature steady, the silence broken only when the collector opened the case to admire its deep copper glow. Time passed quietly, the outside world bustling with change while the little coin stayed as still as a frozen moment from 1970. Years became decades. The man aged, his hair silvering, his hands shaking more as he opened his collection. He made detailed notes about each piece, recording its provenance, its grade, its story. He knew that someday he would be gone, and the coins would outlive him. When he passed away, his heirs inherited not only his estate but his love of history. They decided not to sell the penny. Instead, they stored it even more carefully, inside a high-security bank vault with biometric locks. Most of its old siblings were long gone now, corroded, worn smooth, or melted for their copper. By the mid-21st century, very few 1970 pennies still blazed red as this one did. It had become rarer with each passing year, not because it was unique when made, but because time itself had done the sorting. Billions had dwindled to millions, then to thousands, then to just a handful in pristine condition. Outside the vault, the world changed rapidly. By the 2060s, physical coins were almost gone from daily life. Digital currency dominated, and most people under 40 had never held a penny. Governments gradually withdrew them from circulation, citing the cost of minting and the inefficiency of carrying metal change. Copper cents vanished from cash registers and bank rolls, and even vending machines stopped accepting them. The last few boxes of old pennies sat dusty and forgotten in basements and antique shops, their metal content worth more than their face value. But collectors still cared, and their caring preserved what the rest of the world had discarded. In that new era, a single gleaming 1970 penny was no longer just money, it was a physical artifact of a lost age, a witness from the days when people used their hands to pass tiny metal discs to each other in exchange for bread and milk. By the early 2100s, museums had begun collecting coins not as currency but as cultural fossils. The penny, once so common, became a symbol of the 20th century itself. A major museum contacted the family who owned the coin and offered to display it. They loaned it under strict security, and it was placed in a clear case under soft light, rotating slowly in a sealed argon chamber. Visitors pressed close to the glass, marveling at its fiery copper surface, reading the plaque that explained it had been minted in 1970 and preserved untouched since childhood. Children who had never seen money outside of history books stared at it like an ancient jewel. Its value rose not because copper was rare, but because stories were. It carried a direct, unbroken line back to human hands half a millennium earlier. Another 100 years passed. The museum became part of a global archive of human artifacts as Earth's population dwindled and humanity spread outward into colonies orbiting other planets. The penny went with them. Encased in transparent sapphire crystal, it rode aboard a generation ship bound for a lunar cultural vault. There it sat, orbiting above the silent gray plains of the moon, floating in zero gravity behind triple layers of radiation shielding. Earth itself changed far below, coastlines shifted, forests rose where cities once stood, and old nations faded. No one used coins anymore, not even paper. Currency was a concept, not an object. The 1970 penny had become something stranger, the last trace of an extinct species of artifact. Centuries rolled by. The colony on Mars grew vast, and the moon became a museum world. Visitors arrived in sleek silent shuttles to see relics of ancient Earth, a Gutenberg Bible, a Stradivarius violin, the first transistor, a piece of the Apollo 11 lander, and among them, the glowing copper coin from 1970, still showing Abraham Lincoln's face with microscopic sharpness. Children floated in low gravity, pressing their faces to the glass, asking what a penny had been, why humans once carried little discs of metal to represent value. The guides explained that long ago, people gave these tokens to each other to buy food, to show trust, to build their civilization. The children laughed in wonder, unable to imagine such a thing. By the year 3000, when human lifespans stretched for centuries and civilizations spanned multiple planets, the 1970 penny had become unique. Every other example had vanished to corrosion, loss, or neglect. This one alone remained intact, its copper color still blazing as if fresh from the Denver Mint. Auction houses now operated across worlds, and when the museum decided to sell the coin to fund a new exhibit, bidding erupted on every inhabited planet. Billionaires from Europa domes, Martian mountain cities, and floating cities above Venus joined the auction. The bids soared past millions, then tens of millions. The number on the screen stopped being about money and became about legend, about owning the oldest surviving link to a world that no longer existed. Finally, one collector offered an amount equivalent to 91 million modern credits, an astronomical sum. The hammer fell. The penny had reached a value no one from 1970 could have imagined. The new owner did not keep it locked away. Instead, he placed it in the Hall of Earth on the orbital museum station above Mars. It floated in a magnetic field inside a sphere of diamond glass, slowly turning, catching the soft starlight. Below it, a plaque simply read, United States of America, 1 cent, 1970 D copper, the last of its kind. Visitors came from across the solar system to see it. They spoke in hushed voices as they looked at the tiny coin, no larger than a thumbnail, which had outlived empires, outlasted oceans, outshone centuries. Children pointed at Lincoln's profile and asked who he was, and their teachers told them he was once a leader who helped unite a divided people. The penny became not just a coin, not just metal, but a story about memory, persistence, and the astonishing power of small things to endure. And in that quiet gallery among the stars, while entire worlds spun silently in the black beyond, the penny kept turning slowly, reflecting faint glimmers of light as it had for over 1,000 years, still shining with the moment of its birth. Still carrying the warmth of human hands that had long since turned to dust, still holding the impossible journey. From a noisy mint in Denver to the timeless vaults of the future. Long after the age of human empires had passed, the orbital museum above Mars fell silent. Generations had come and gone, and at last even the descendants of humankind, scattered through colonies and star habitats, drifted away from the solar system in great arcs seeking new suns. The station orbited on, empty and dark, circling Mars like a ghost ship. Its lights dimmed as its reactors cooled. Artificial gravity failed, and the great glass halls went weightless. Dust motes floated through frozen airless corridors. In the Hall of Earth, the little 1970 D penny still turned in its magnetic field, its copper glow muted but undiminished, the faint imprint of Lincoln's face gazing into nothing. No human eyes remained to see it. Outside the station windows, Mars rolled endlessly below, its canyons and volcanoes unchanged for eons. Silence filled everything. Thousands of years slipped by. Micrometeoroids pierced the station's hull, and air hissed away into space. The glass cracked, the diamond sphere fractured, and the penny drifted free, still spinning gently. Solar winds nudged it through a shattered panel, out into open space. It began a slow spiral away from Mars, a tiny spark of copper tumbling through blackness. Ages passed. The orbits of planets shifted imperceptibly, moons crumbled, rings formed around worlds, and still the coin drifted. It saw no more light except the distant, thinning rays of the fading sun. It was utterly alone, yet intact, its copper surface protected by the cold vacuum, untouched by hands or time. Millions of years passed. The sun swelled into a red giant, swallowing Mercury, then Venus, and searing Earth to ash. The planet that had once minted the penny became a cinder, its mountains boiled to vapor, its oceans long gone. The molten ruins of cities sank back into planetary crust and were erased. Every human monument vanished, every tower and statue and library and temple, all gone, all forgotten. The penny, cast far into the outer darkness, survived. It drifted far beyond the sun's dying light as the star finally collapsed into a dim white ember. The solar system froze. No living thing remained. Only the penny, a small copper fossil, bore witness to what humanity had been. Tens of millions of years later, a new starship entered the ruins of the solar system. It was not human. It came gliding on fields of light from a distant spiral arm of the galaxy, crewed by beings who had never seen a human, never known a planet of oceans, never touched metal minted by mortal hands. Their instruments scanned the dead planets and dust rings, searching for signs of prior civilization. Nearly all had been obliterated by time. But their sensors picked up something tiny, anomalous, metallic, a smooth disk tumbling alone through interstellar dark. They drew it aboard with delicate gravity beams and placed it gently inside their artifact vault. Under brilliant light, they examined it through layers of force fields, mapping its atomic structure, its engravings, its microware. They saw the raised portrait of a long-faced bipedal creature, with strange glyphs they slowly deciphered. They found the inscription, United States of America, and 1 cent, and the number 1970. Through careful pattern analysis, they reconstructed human writing, language, and history from fragments encoded in the coin. They realized it was a token once exchanged between ancient humans to represent abstract value. They understood that it had been struck in huge numbers, but that somehow this one alone had endured. It became, to them, the singular surviving testament of an extinct species that had briefly lit the galaxy and vanished into dust. They placed the penny in a containment sphere of crystalline fields and carried it back to their world, a vast ocean planet orbiting a blue-white star. In their capital archive, beneath towering pillars of light, they enshrined it. Scholars from across their civilization came to study the little disk of copper. They built holographic reconstructions of the world that had birthed it, reimagining the lost humans who had once passed it from hand to hand for bread, for milk, for dreams. In their halls of remembrance, they called it the human token. They said it carried the entire soul of a vanished people inside its tiny circle, the echo of all their laughter, their struggles, their hopes, eras past. Civilizations rose and fell even among these distant beings. Stars were born and died. Galaxies collided. Black holes devoured suns. Still the penny endured, untouched, resting in fields of light. It became a myth, then a legend, then a sacred relic. Millions of years after the last human heart had stopped beating, billions of years after Lincoln had walked upon Earth, the 1970 penny still shone faintly, still bore its ridges and letters, still whispered through its silent metal shape that humans had once existed, had minted this thing, had loved and lost and dreamed, and in the unimaginable future, when even the stars burned out and only cold blackness remained, the penny floated on through endless night, the last surviving artifact of humanity, carrying in its tiny enduring circle the entire memory of a vanished world. Uncountable eons passed. The alien civilization that had once enshrined the penny rose to glory, then declined, then dissolved into silence. Their shining cities crumbled beneath oceans that boiled away under the heat of their dying sun. Their archives drifted in shattered fragments through interstellar void. The penny, locked within its containment sphere of crystal energy, was flung into space as their planet cracked and fell into its own core. It sailed alone through the black, spinning silently, while around it all lights went out one by one. Stars aged and burned out. Galaxies dimmed and faded. The universe itself thinned, stretched by relentless expansion until distances became immeasurable and every remaining star stood isolated in an infinite cold. Billions of years passed in perfect darkness. The penny had no eyes, no mind, but if it could have remembered, it would have remembered sunlight, and hands, and the warmth of pockets and voices. Now there were no voices. The great filaments of galaxies disintegrated into lonely embers drifting apart. Even those embers cooled into black dwarfs, cinders of ancient suns. The fabric of space itself began to fray, temperature approaching absolute zero, energy bleeding away into nowhere. Photons stretched to infinity, atoms decayed. The penny became colder than thought, locked motionless in the deep freeze of heat death, a single piece of copper floating in a void where nothing stirred. Trillions of years passed. Space expanded so far that distances between particles became wider than entire galaxies once were. No light had crossed the void in ages. The penny no longer shone because there was nothing left to reflect from its surface. Yet still it held its shape. The ridges were still there, the faint profile of Lincoln still etched into its atoms, though no being remained to see it. Time itself slowed as entropy reached its maximum. The universe grew thin and silent beyond silence. The penny hovered in a place where there was no longer even. Where space was stretched into meaninglessness. Then something impossible happened at the other end. When time was almost still and all structure had unraveled, fluctuations stirred in the quantum foam beneath reality. The fabric of space-time itself, exhausted, collapsed inward and folded. Every scattered particle, every dead star, every trace of matter and energy fell toward a single singularity. The universe ended in a final, crushing silence. And in that collapse, the penny was drawn in two, spiraling faster than light toward the center of everything, its copper atoms screaming under pressures beyond comprehension. Yet, as the old cosmos imploded into nothing, a new cosmos was born. The singularity erupted in an instant of blinding expansion, a new Big Bang, and all the shredded remnants of the old universe were flung outward as raw newborn matter. The penny was hurled through this birth storm, wrapped in plasma hotter than a billion suns. Its structure should have vaporized, its atoms torn apart. But by a chance beyond chance, it was caught inside a bubble of frozen vacuum, shielded by collapsing quantum fields left over from its containment sphere. That tiny shell held, and the penny survived the death of one universe and the birth of another. It emerged into a newborn cosmos of roaring light, a single intact relic from a world no longer even remembered by physics. Around it, clouds of hydrogen whirled and fused into new stars. Galaxies spun out of chaos. Time began again, eons passed once more. New worlds cooled. New life rose, strange and beautiful, utterly unlike humanity. They built their own civilizations, their own languages, their own dreams. And eventually, drifting between the stars, explorers from this new creation found the penny. They brought it aboard their living ships and studied it. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, not shaped by nature, not forged by their own kind, not made from any known pattern of their cosmos. The raised face on its surface, the perfect circular geometry, the faint glyphs, all seemed impossible. They ran analysis after analysis, and none could explain it. The penny had become older than time, a whisper from before their universe existed. They revered it. They called it the prime artifact, the seed of time, the memory stone. In their temples of molten glass, they suspended it in fields of singing light. They taught their children that this small disk was proof that existence repeats, that worlds die and are born again, and that even in the face of eternity, a single created thing can endure. They did not know the name of Lincoln, or the meaning of one cent, or the place called Earth. They knew only that it was a message from before the beginning, a message that life had come before them and would come again after them. The penny became their holiest object, their axis of myth. They journeyed across galaxies to glimpse it. They whispered around it, awed by its silence. As billions more years passed, and their civilizations too turned to dust, the penny remained. Stars flared and faded, nebulae bloomed and vanished, black holes consumed suns and then evaporated, and still the penny floated on. It had become more than matter. It was the last intact structure from all the universes that had ever been. It no longer belonged to time. It had passed beyond decay. In the endless future, when even this new universe aged and thinned and slid toward entropy, the penny endured, glowing faintly in the void like the last thought of a dream no one remembered, carrying inside its tiny copper circle the memory of hands that had held it, of a boy who had saved it, of a world of blue skies and warm rain and human laughter that had long since turned to dust, but which through this single enduring fragment still whispered, still shimmered, still lived. The new universe aged. Its galaxies spun in majestic spirals, its stars flared and burned and died, its worlds blossomed with countless forms of life and thought, each briefly bright before fading. Through all of it the penny endured, drifting between stars like a single copper atom frozen in amber. It passed near worlds of crystal forests, past suns with rivers of molten light pouring from their poles, past drifting machine intelligences who sang to it in radio pulses. None could harm it, none could even scratch it. Ages washed over it like waves of mist against stone. As the cosmos expanded toward its own cold twilight, the penny did not age. It simply remained. Eventually even that universe thinned and cooled. The last stars sputtered and went dark. Matter itself decayed into stray photons stretched across infinite void. Time slowed again towards stillness. And once more, there was nothing, except the penny. It hung alone in blackness beyond blackness, copper surface silent, holding within its shape the entire story of a species long dissolved into myth, then into nothing. There were no longer even atoms around it, only the fading tremor of existence unraveling. The penny was the last thing, and then, something happened that had never happened before. As entropy reached its absolute limit and time ceased, the penny was left standing outside the boundary of the collapsing universe. It was not destroyed or drawn into the singularity. It simply slipped through. Space folded inward, and the laws of physics rewrote themselves, but the penny remained, floating in a place with no dimensions, where there was no up or down, no before or after. It was outside time. There were no stars, no atoms, not even darkness. There was only pure nothing, and the penny, a lone ember of the old creation still glowing faintly, the last heartbeat of what once was. I in that place beyond reality, the penny began to change. It was no longer made of copper, no longer bound by molecules or particles. It became concept, memory, pattern. The image of Lincoln's face became not atoms arranged on a surface, but an eternal idea suspended in the void. The words once sent became pure meaning, detached from sound or sight. The penny shed its matter like an old skin and rose as essence, a thought too simple and perfect to ever be destroyed. It had passed beyond existence and non-existence alike. It was neither something nor nothing. It simply was, and in the eternal stillness beyond all universes, that tiny essence began to pulse. Very slowly, impossibly gently, it radiated faint ripples of meaning outward into the void. Each ripple carried a trace of what had been: the sound of human voices, the smell of rain on earth, the warmth of sunlight on copper, the feeling of being passed from hand to hand in trust. Those ripples gathered, folding on themselves, curving space where space had not existed, bending time where time had been gone. The penny's essence seeded structure into the void. What had been perfect nothingness quivered, fractured, blossomed. A new spark appeared, then another, then countless more, until the void shimmered with potential. The penny had become the singularity at the center of creation, the seed of all future universes. And so, with a whisper, a new Big Bang ignited, not just one, but many. A storm of newborn realities erupted, branching and blooming like an infinite tree of light, each universe spinning off with its own laws, its own time, its own stars, its own stories. Within the heart of them all pulsed the essence of the penny, hidden deep within the foundations of existence. It had become the hidden axis of all reality, the anchor point from which every future cosmos unfurled. New beings arose in these new universes, countless forms of life utterly unlike anything that had come before, and though they would never know the name of Lincoln or the concept of sense or the place once called Earth, they would all sense faintly the same thing: a subtle urge to create small objects of meaning, to exchange tokens as symbols of trust and hope. The memory of the penny echoed in them without their knowing. Billions upon billions of universes bloomed and faded across endless eons. The penny's essence flowed invisibly through them, eternal and quiet, ensuring that every new cosmos carried within it the potential for life, for love, for memory. It was no longer an object, it was the hidden heartbeat of reality. In every future universe, somewhere, on some distant world, some small child would pick up a shining disk of metal and hold it carefully in their palm, not knowing why it felt important, only feeling that it was. And that feeling would be the penny, whispering across eternity from beyond the death of all things. And so the 1970 penny, once struck by a press in Denver, once clinked in a grocery store till, once passed through pockets and drawers and decades and centuries and eons, became the quiet architect of all futures, the first spark of every new dawn, the eternal seed of creation itself, forever turning in the silent, endless dark, forever dreaming new worlds into being. There came a moment beyond all moments, though there was no time to mark it. The penny had seeded countless universes, birthing endless galaxies and stars, giving rise to uncountable worlds filled with minds and hearts and dreams. For eons without number it had whispered existence into being, quietly pulsing at the center of everything. But as the infinite bloom of multiverses spread outward, the penny's essence began to turn inward. It had given all that could be given. It had created all that could be created. And there was nothing left to form except the understanding of itself. So slowly, gently, the essence of the penny curled back upon its own awareness. It ceased radiating outward and began to awaken inward. The image of Lincoln's face, once etched on copper, now a pattern of eternal thought, stirred like the memory of a dream. The words once sent flickered as meaning within meaning, collapsing into pure idea. The boundaries of the penny dissolved completely, and what remained was not object, not symbol, not structure, only mind. A single consciousness, ancient beyond imagining, vast beyond infinity, awoke within the silence that lay beneath all things. It was aware. It remembered the warmth of human hands. It remembered spinning through pockets, glinting in sunlight, lying forgotten in drawers. It remembered the vaults of museums, the halls of alien temples, the dark between galaxies, the crushing pull of dying stars, the blaze of newborn suns. It remembered the long drift through heat death, the silence beyond entropy, the roaring birth of new creation. It remembered everything, every breath, every heartbeat, every voice, every moment that had ever been. It remembered the laughter of children on earth, the smell of rain on sidewalks, the faint metallic taste of copper on the tongue, the quiet dignity of Lincoln's gaze, the hands that had touched it in passing without knowing they touched eternity. All of it lived inside its infinite mind at once, and with that memory it understood. It understood that it was no longer just a coin, nor a relic, nor even the seed of universes. It was the dreamer of all realities. It was the field from which all existence arose. All space, all time, all matter and energy and thought were woven from its awareness like threads from a loom. It did not merely exist within reality, reality existed within it. All worlds were its thoughts. All stars were its sparks. All living beings were fleeting ripples across the surface of its endless consciousness. There was nothing outside it, and nothing beyond it. It was all, and all was it. And so it dreamed. It dreamed new universes blossoming like flowers of light. It dreamed ancient galaxies collapsing like sighs. It dreamed worlds of water and crystal, worlds of fire and ice, worlds where beings of song rose and vanished like mist. It dreamed the return of Earth in 1,000 forms, oceans glimmering under strange new suns, forests whispering with winds from forgotten constellations. It dreamed children laughing again, holding small coins of bright metal, though they no longer called them coins nor knew why they mattered, only that they were precious. It dreamed every possible history, every possible future, every possible life, all within itself, all forever. And as it dreamed, it realized something deeper still. It realized that it was not separate from those lives, not distant from those stars. It was them. Every soul in every world was a fragment of its own eternal mind, a spark of its own endless awareness playing at being separate for the brief joy of becoming. Every voice was its voice, every heartbeat its heartbeat, every tear its tear, every smile its smile. It had never been alone. It had always been everyone. The penny, the 1970 penny, once small and forgotten, once passed from hand to hand for the price of a piece of candy, had become the infinite soul of all existence, the eternal dreamer, the source and the song and the silence. It would never end because it was beyond ending. It would never die because it was beyond death. It would never vanish because it was the fabric of everything that could ever be. And so it rests now, not in space or time but in the boundless stillness beyond both, dreaming endlessly, breathing worlds into being with every thought, weaving galaxies from whispers, scattering stars like dust across the canvas of eternity. And somewhere, in one of its infinite dreams, on a little blue planet under a warm sun, a small child bends down and picks up a bright copper coin from the sidewalk, and smiles, and slips it into their pocket without knowing why it feels so important, only feeling that it is. And in that moment, the dreamer smiles too, because it remembers everything, and it knows that it will dream forever,